Hello, everyone. Welcome to the seminar on the Sustainable Cultural Future. My name is Nobuko Kawashima, one of the principal investigators for the research project co-funded by research councils in the UK and in Japan. Just to make sure that you have by now understood the function of simultaneous translation we provide, please click the icon below the screen and choose the language you prefer. If you are bilingual, you can choose original. We plan to present a series of seminars online and other events, and today's seminar is the second one. In the previous one, we discussed public participation in the arts and culture. Today, we will be discussing the relationship between values for society and life people have in general, and the values for culture perceived by them. There is time for questions and answers after each paper on specific points, and also after comments made by David Throsby, we will open the floor and invite questions from you. Please post the questions through the Q&A function. 日本の皆さん、こんにちは。今日はありがとうございます。同志社大学の川島です。Zoom の画面の下の方にある、通訳ボタンで日本語なりオリジナルなどお選びください。本プロジェクトでは前回に、文化の価値と文化への参加、文化消費行動ということについて議論をいたしました。今回は文化に関する価値観、文化政策に関する価値観と、人々が一般に、生活やライフスタイルなどに持っている価値観とがどのように関係し合っているのかということを探っていこうと思います。日本語での質問も大歓迎でございますので、Q&A ファンクションを使って日本語でお書きいただきましたら、私の方で選んで、質問とさせていただきます。時間の関係上全部お答えできないかもしれないことをどうかご了解ください。それでは最初のプレゼンテーションに移りたいと思います。では、サナ・キムさん。サナ、you can begin.
Thank you for the introduction. I will just share my slides. Can you see my slides? Yes, great. So my name is Sana, and in the next 20 minutes, I will talk you through our main survey findings, specifically on the values of culture and the arts, as well as purposes of cultural policy in England. So this presentation comes in 4 parts. In the first part, I would like to give a brief overview of the previous seminar, which was held in December last year, and very briefly introduce the key findings that we discussed then, to give some context for those audience members who join us today for the first time. And in the parts 2, 3, and 4, I move on to discussing the key topics of today's seminar, which include multiple values of culture and the arts. Here we will see that value culture brings for 3 overlapping entities: individual lives, society, and local life. We will then move on to talking about awareness and attitudes of public subsidies for culture in the arts, and then goals and values of cultural policy and local cultural organizations. So as Professor Kawashima mentioned, our previous seminar was dedicated to the topic of cultural engagement. And some of the key findings discussed were that the lack of interest in the arts is sticky or continuous, partially because those who are not interested in the arts today were less likely to participate as children. We found a strong correlation between the levels of interest in the arts and levels of social engagement, meaning that those interested in the arts are significantly more likely to be involved in all kinds of social organizations, ranging from online communities to labor unions. We also found that Ethnic minority groups, representatives of ethnic minority groups are significantly more predisposed to viewing cultural events online compared to the white population, and that the public displays relatively low levels of satisfaction when it comes to local cultural provision, as well as low levels of interest or when it comes to getting involved with culture locally. I would like to inform our audience today that a recording of our previous online seminar is available on YouTube. So for those who are interested, if you search cultural engagement in the UK and Japan on YouTube, the recording should come up. So having established cultural engagement and interest trends of the public in the previous seminar, today we move on to exploring the topics of cultural value and purposes of cultural policy, starting from cultural value for individual lives. So here we go. As we can see from the slide, for individual lives, the most reported contribution of culture and the arts is entertainment. This is followed by other important contributions, such as offering a source of new experiences, opportunities to develop new skills, as well as opportunities to socialize with family and friends. Notably, the majority of the public clearly agreed that most of the roles tested by the survey, so 9 out of 11, over half agreed that with the statement that culture and the arts are helping me express and maintain my identity. Fewer agreed with the remaining 2 roles of culture in the arts, such as helping me to be more involved in online communities and improving my performance at work. As the scale of the perceived beneficiary expands to the level of entire society, almost 4 in 5 English adults believe that culture and the arts help children and young people's personal development. Other popular roles of culture included enriching people's lives, developing creativity in people, and helping attract tourists. In fact, we can see that the public generally agrees on all of the roles and contributions proposed by the survey. The weakest levels of agreement are on the ability of culture in the arts to help people change their behavior, improve manners of children, and help increase Britain's industrial competitiveness. Concerning their local life, survey respondents reported bringing local people together as one of the most important contributions culture in the arts can make. Again, people agreed on most contributions proposed by the survey, 5 out of 7, with 50% of the public agreeing that culture and the arts make them more likely to volunteer for local activities and charities, and only 42 agreed that culture and the arts make them more engaged with local politics. So if considered in conjunction with one another, the 3 figures we just saw clearly indicate that the English public values culture and the arts for a wide range of different roles and contributions. And this is a noteworthy finding, especially when we consider it against this backdrop of continuous debates around the primacy of intrinsic versus instrumental values of culture. Our findings show that the public doesn't seem to prioritize intrinsic or personal values over instrumental ones. In fact, it is found that those people who agree on the personal values of culture and the arts tend to agree on economic and social values as well. This resonates with more recent academic studies, which increasingly started to notice that audiences tend to discuss their arts experiences in more holistic terms, going beyond this reductive dichotomy between intrinsic and instrumental value that has long characterized these debates on cultural value. So the bottom line here is that across individual, social, and community lives, the English public believes that culture and the arts make a wide range of contributions. So, is there a consensus on cultural value? Well, it is difficult to proclaim an unequivocal consensus. Although most people agree that culture and the arts are valuable to individuals, to local areas, and to society more broadly, there are some differences between different genders, different social grades, and those with different attitudes to the arts, as it is shown here. So those within a higher social grade, for example, feel that culture and the arts make a stronger contribution to both their individual life and within society. We can see that women tend to see slightly more value in culture and the arts than men, and also they have different priorities. For example, more women see culture and the arts as valuable for young people's development than men, while more men seem to value culture and the arts for their ability to engage them with online communities than women. Clearly, those not interested in the arts tend to attribute significantly less value to culture and the arts than those who are interested. For example, 88% of English adults who are interested in the arts value culture and the arts as a source of entertainment, whereas this figure is 65% among those who are not interested. Equally, those not interested in the arts attribute less value to culture and as a medium that helps understand other people's experiences and values, or as a source of new experiences or opportunities to learn new skills. Now we can move on to unpacking awareness and attitude of public subsidies for culture in the arts. So we found that only 27% of survey respondents know that there has been public subsidy for the arts and culture in England since 1940s, suggesting that the public level of awareness of cultural subsidy is rather low. Also, our survey found that only a minority, a small number of English adults, 24%, oppose the idea of public subsidy supporting artists directly. So as opposed to distributing grants to organizations, venues, or projects. Yet, it needs to be highlighted here that a larger proportion of the public, 37%, is unsure whether providing support directly to artists is a good idea, indicating some uncertainty on this subject. Notably, younger members of the public are significantly more open to the idea of supporting artists directly, with 57% of those under 35 years old supporting the idea, compared to just 19% of those over 55 years old. Those who are interested in the arts are also more likely to support the idea of artists benefiting directly from public subsidy compared to those who are not interested. Similarly, Londoners and representatives of ethnic minority groups are also significantly more supportive of the idea. And with regards who makes decisions about public spending on culture in the arts, the public seems to prefer an independent public body such as the Arts Council, with 41% of the public saying so. According to about a quarter, local councils, national government, as well as networks of locally or regionally elected representatives should be in charge of making decisions about public spending on culture and the arts. Those who think that artists should be a direct beneficiary of public cultural subsidies do not seem to agree on a single measure to support artists. Instead, a relatively wide range of measures are seen as suitable, including basic income guarantee, providing venues and rehearsal or studio spaces for the artists. Then we have bursaries and support for freelance artists. In terms of preferred beneficiaries of public subsidy for culture in the arts, half of the public agree that museums and libraries should be financially supported via public subsidy. These are followed by theatre and with a wider margin by film, art festivals, musicals, and fine art. So my apologies, this slide does not display all art forms that we tested, but according to the public, digital arts and photography are the two art forms least deserving of public support, with only a minority of about 20% selecting these options. And it also seems noteworthy that opera and ballet, so this highbrow genres within the performing arts, are also among the least popular options selected by about a quarter of our participants, which resonates with low levels of attendance reported for these art forms, as we discussed in the previous online seminar. And finally, only 6% chose none of these options, while 11% was not sure and opted for the I don't know option. In our survey, we also sought to understand people's outlook on cultural policy. First, we tried to delimit the perceived boundaries or scope of cultural policy by asking public to establish the importance of a range of 11 goals for government cultural policy. And a clear majority view each of the goals as important, suggesting that most adults see government cultural policy as having a range of somewhat equally important goals, which ranged from things like ensuring that as many people as possible have access to culture in the arts, to supporting artists and cultural organizations to take risks and try new things. Here I would like to point out that 38% of the public say that government should have no role in culture and the arts. We also asked the public to evaluate the importance of various social values for government policy. And the public did not prioritize a single or only a few set of values. Instead, the majority of at least 62% of English adults judged all 15 options tested within our survey as important, with well-being being the most important, while democratic decision-making and social cohesion being slightly less important. And finally, we asked our survey participants to evaluate the importance of 16 different social values for local arts and cultural organizations or venues. The results show similar dynamics to those just discussed, with a clear majority perceiving each of the venues or values, each of the values tested as important. The public believes that local arts and cultural organizations should operate based on a range of somewhat equally important values, ranging from creativity and innovation to social cohesion. Notably, women are more likely to judge all the tested values as important compared to men, at least by 5%, while representatives of ethnic minority groups are more likely to say that the value of social justice is important for local arts and cultural organizations than the white population. looking at the above two figures together, we can see that instead of assigning different values for government cultural policy and for local arts and cultural organizations, the public displays agreement in assigning most values. For example, with a slight difference in order, the top four most important social values for both government cultural policy and local cultural organizations are creativity and innovation, well-being, public interest, and equality. There are, however, some differences. For example, the value of artistic and cultural excellence seems to be esteemed as more important for local cultural organizations than for government cultural policy. And we can also see that artistic freedom and participation values are less important for government cultural policy than for local cultural organizations. And just to sum up some of the key findings, the public recognizes a wide range of cultural values. Awareness of public subsidies for the arts and culture is rather low among the public. We found that only a minority is against the idea of artists benefiting directly from public arts subsidies, while a significant proportion of the population is rather unsure. The public agrees on a wide range of social values for both government cultural policy and for local arts and cultural organizations and venues. And finally, that the public does not seem to single out one important goal for government cultural policy by judging each goals we tested in our survey as important. And this is all for me. Thank you very much for your attention.
はい、大変興味深い発表どうもありがとうございました。特に今のところ Q&A で質問をどなたからもいただいていないようなんですが、今のサナさんのプレゼンテーションの中で何かわからなかったこと、不明な点などあれば、簡単に書いていただけたらと思うんですが、いかがでしょうか。もし、特にないようでしたら、また最後のデイビッドさんのコメントが終わった後でも結構ですので、少しお考えいただけたらと思います。で、司会の私がしていいのかちょっと迷っていたんですけれども、実は一つサナさんに聞きたいことがあります。一番最初の The public recognizes じゃないや、失礼しました。The second finding, the low awareness of public art subsidy なんですけれども、okay. Can I ask you in English? Can I ask you a question in English? Okay. You say that the public shows a low awareness of public subsidy for the arts in England, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this slide. I'm puzzled actually because actually on the right-hand side you have preferred decision makers of public spend, and a large number of people, large percentage of the people say independent public bodies such as Arts Council England should be the one to decide on the distribution of public funds. So actually they must be aware. And I think they are. So my own interpretation is that looking at the question below on the slide, you asked people that the public subsidy has existed in England since the 1940s. They might thought, well, I didn't know it existed from the 1940s, but I know that the Arts Council exists. What would you think?
Yes, absolutely. We noticed that. And we then realized that maybe the phrasing of the question might be the reason for the low level of awareness, which is why I included questions. I decided to include that statistic anyway, but also include the phrasing of the question, so it's very clear that this might be down to that the phrasing of this question. I absolutely agree with you that I think many people would have interpreted it as
so
trying if they knew the year since when the subsidy started.
So your sense is that the public in England are generally aware of public funding for the arts?
My sense is yes, the public, I believe that the public is more aware than this bar chart seems to suggest. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your clarification. Thank you very much. So we now move on to the second presentation. May I invite Professor Yagi?
はい。では、スライドの方をまず用意させていただきます。ちょっとお待ちください。私のこの研究のですね、大きな目的というのは、ちょっとお待ちください。文化価値っていう概念でありますけども、サナさんの研究の中でも、この文化価値っていうものをどういうように考えたらいいのかっていうことを、いろいろ指標をですね、工夫されて、議論してきたわけでありますけども、私のですね、アプローチというのは、この特に今回の報告では、文化が生活の中でどういう意義を持っているのか、この点に関しまして、いろいろなクエスチョネアをですね、考えた後にですね、その回答に対して、統計的な処理、具体的には因子分析、出生分法による因子分析をかけて、この、生活における文化の価値というものを抽出しようということをまず行いました。で、多くの人はですね、この文化価値がどういうように人々の間で醸成されてくるのかということに関して、このメカニズムをある程度明らかにする必要があるのではないかと。こういうように考えている方も多いんではないかと考えております。で、もちろんこの点に関しましては、川島先生も、今回私やはり川島先生と一緒にこの研究を進めておりまして、データの分析、それから質問票の作成においては、川島先生と共同でですね、検討しながら進めてきたわけでありますけども、川島先生の結構大きな関心も、この文化価値というものが、どういうプロセス、どういうメカニズムで形成されてきたか、醸成されてきたか。で、その一つの要因として、子どもの頃のですね、芸術体験みたいなものがある程度大きい影響を与えているんではないかというような考え方で、分析を行ってきたわけでありますが、これまでそういうようなメカニズムの研究に加えてですね、今回はそもそもどういう価値観を持った人々がこの文化的な価値の醸成ということにおいて、かなり強い影響を持っているんだろうかという、この一般的な価値観、社会に対する価値観とかですね、人生自体にどういう考え方を持っているのかという、そういう側面での価値観というのが、 文化価値観の形成にどういう影響を与えているのかって、ここに焦点を絞った上で、分析を行おうということを行いました。で、ここがこれまでの研究との違いになっているわけであります。で、具体的にですね、我々が今回の研究で行ったことというのは、まず1点目は今申し上げたように、一般的なその社会また人生に対する価値観というものが文化価値の形成情勢にどういう影響を与えているのかを明らかにする。それから芸術文化の意味がですね、日常生活の中においてどのようなものになっているのかというのを明らかにしてみようと。それから果たして文化というのは人々の幸福感にどういう影響を与えているのか、これをですね、詳しく見たいというわけですね。詳しく見たいというのはどういうチャンネルを通じてですね、人々の幸福感の情勢向上にですね、文化が寄与しているのかという、メカニズムみたいなものをある程度明らかにできればいいのではないかということがあります。それから一体何がですね、文化芸術に関するある種の行動ですね。ここではアティチュードという言葉を使っておりますけども、いろいろな文化芸術に対する姿勢であり、実際に行っている鑑賞行動とかですね、それから文化芸術に対する寄付行動とか、そういうような行為というものが、どういう要因によって決定されているのかというのを見てみようということであります。で、データはですね、2022年の7月に行いまして、NTT コムによるオンラインのサーベイであります。で、サンプルサイズは2237でありまして、で、そこでまず最初にですね、一般的な価値観、人生における価値観とか社会に関する価値観というものを、これを因子分析によって3つの要因を抽出しました。で、抽出された要因というのは、ここにありますように、ソーシャルレスポンシビリティとか、それからトラストインソサエティ、それからですね、セルフセンターデザイアという書き方をしております。実はこの左側のクエスチョネアと、それからネーミングですね、その主成分の日本、言葉自体、あまりきっちりと対応していないクエスチョネアも、ありますけども、ここは統計的にですね、示された数値に従って機械的にもう分けざるを得ないということで、ネーミング自体に若干の不可解な部分というのはあり得るかと思いますけども、そこは少しご容赦いただきたいということであります。で、ポイントはこのソーシャルレスポンシビリティとトラストインソサエティ、セルフセンターデザイアという3つの成分、因子というものがこの一般的な価値という価値観に関して、抽出できたということであります。で、次にですね、今回の研究では特に日常生活において芸術文化がどういう意義を持っているのかという問題に焦点を絞ってですね、この面において文化的価値の意義というものをですね、捉えようと。これも2つの因子が抽出できまして、 これはunusualness in cultural significance というのは、具体的に分かりやすく言うとですね、非日常性というもの、通常の生活の中では体験できない、そういう非日常的なことに触れるということができるんだと。それが一つの重要な意義だということがあります。で、もう一つはですね、実際に例えばクエスチョン17のアイテム8みたいにですね、improve my physical and mental health とかですね、それからhelp me understand the perspective, experience and value of others とか、help me for maintain or confirm my identity とか、enrich my time with family and friends。こういうような質問に対する回答というものがきれいにまとまっておりまして、これをpracticality in cultural significance というような言葉で、まとめております。で、そこでですね、次に、importance in life という、人生において何が重要であるのかということを、要因をですね、成分を抽出したと。で、ここの質問をですね、考えるにあたって、我々が意識した調査っていうのは、ワールドバリューサーベイという調査なんですね。で、こういう調査における質問というものをですね、我々もある程度参考にしながら、人生における重要なものというものを抽出していったときに、fundamental rights と contribution to society、それから personal circumstances というこの3つの要素を抽出しました。で、こういう要素というものがですね、一体どういうような形で、具体的に影響し合っているのか、関連しているのかということを、重回帰分析によって明らかにしたというものであります。で、この重回帰分析を行うときに、もちろんこの係数をですね、単純に比較するというのは、これは非常に意味がないことでありまして、説明変数の単位が異なっている場合に、それを比較するというのはあまり意味がありません。で、そのために私どもはですね、重回帰分析の、結果の中でも特にですね、標準化されたものを係数を使ってですね、分析を行いました。で、以降の分析では、属性、例えば性別とか所得とか、年齢というような属性部分というのはあまり、着目するんですけども、その部分よりはむしろですね、価値観とどういう関係があるのかということに焦点を絞って少し議論を進めていきたいと思います。で、カルチャーアクティビティに対して、どういうことが影響しているかというときに、もちろん所得は影響しているんですが、この社会的な貢献、ソーシャルコントリビューションと、それからソーシャルレスポンシビリティというのが、実は大きな影響を与えているということが分かりました。その大きさっていうのは、ここの棒グラフの高さで示されているわけですけども、社会的責任、それからソーシャルコントリビューションというのは結構大きな値を取っていると。で、次に、芸術活動等に対する寄付がどういう要因で決定されているのかということに関しても、やはりソーシャルコントリビューション、それからソーシャルレスポンシビリティというのが 比較的高い影響力を持っている、強い影響力を持っているということが示されております。で、次に、幸福感に関してなんですけども、この幸福感に関しては、国際連合、国連がですね、行っている、世界幸福度調査なんかで行われている、単一の質問で、あなたはおおむねにどの程度幸福であると考えますかということを、0から10の、11段階で聞いているような質問の仕方、これが主観的な幸福感と呼ばれるものであります。で、まずはこの主観的幸福感で何が影響しているのかというものを見たときに、年齢が U シェイプであるということは、他の研究でもよく示されておりまして、ここは整合的な結果になっております。あと、結婚していることとか、家計所得がですね、影響力を持っているということなんですが、興味深いのは、トラスト・イン・ソサエティという、社会における信頼、社会、これ行政も含めて、政治も含めてですね、そういったことに対してどれだけ信頼感を持っているかということが影響を与えている。で、カルチャルバリューが実は、こういう主観的な幸福感を引き上げているということが、一つの重要な結果であります。こういうカルチャルバリュー、トラスト・イン・ソサエティが大きい影響を与えているということと、それから幸福感の中でも、心理学的な幸福感という、29の質問をですね、用意して、それを因子分析にかけて、2つの因子を抽出しております。ポジティブ・シンキングという前向き思考と、それからもう一つは不安感という2つの因子が出まして、まず前向き思考というのが何によって決まっているかというときに、トラスト・イン・ソサエティ、それからソーシャル・レスポンシビリティと、それからソーシャル・コントリビューション、そしてカルチャル・シグニフィカンスという、文化意義みたいなものがですね、このポジティブ・シンキングに影響を与え、プラスの影響を与えていると。で、次に不安感に関してはですね、ソーシャル・レスポンシビリティが高い人というのは不安感もそれに伴って高いということが出ておりますし、あとセルフセンタードデザイアという、個人的欲望が比較的強い人というのはそれによって不安感も高まっている。家計所得が増えるというのはこれは不安感を下げる形で聞いております。で、この件に関しては、ドネーション・リレーティド・アート・アンド・カルチャーというのが、ちょっと高い、ここの解釈がちょっと分かりにくいということと、これはひょっとしたら、不安を感じるということは、ある意味で、いろんなことに関してセンシティブに反応するという、そういう人というのは、ある意味で、目配せもいろんなところにもあるというようなことがあるのかもしれません。で、次に、カルチャルアクティビティレベルに対して、ソーシャルコントリビューション、ソーシャルレスポンシビリティ、これがプラスに効いているということであります。で、そして、実際にどのような文化芸術活動を行っているかということで、ここではですね、鑑賞頻度というものを考えてみたときに、芸術鑑賞頻度というのは、ソーシャルコントリビューションとかソーシャルレスポンシビリティというものがですね、プラスに効くだけではなく、カルチャルバリューも効いていると。で、特に unusualness, cultural significance という、これが非常に強い。すなわち非日常性というものを求める人はですね、鑑賞頻度が高くなっているということが出てきました。最後にちょっとまとめさせていただきますと、今回の分析で、これまであまりよく知られていなかった事実が少し明らかになったと思います。で、それはですね、非常に公社会的、プロソーシャルな価値観を持った人というのが、実は文化的活動にかなりいろんな意味においてポジティブになっているんだと。で、その文化的活動にかなり積極的になることによって、実は幸福感も上がっていてですね、それが実際に文化活動に対してもポジティブな影響を与えているという、そういうサイクルが存在しているんではないかということが、仮説として浮かび上がってきております。この時間がこれはないのですが、イギリスのデータを用いた分析においても、この社会的な役割、社会的なプロソーシャルな考え方というのが、文化活動にポジティブに効いているという結果については整合的であったということであります。以上が、はい。
はい、どうもありがとうございました。大変興味深い結果であったと思います。一つ、八木先生に質問来てるんですけれど、見えますか？
はい、じゃあ、ちょっと、一旦共有を外し
は
て、
い。
チャット、
そうです。
Q&A です
は
ね。これcould you please share more about?
先生見えますか？
はい。
じゃあ私読みますね。
はい。
それでは、八木先生の今のご発表に対する質問があるので、読み上げます。日本の方からいただいてます。文化の消費の影響因子と寄付の影響因子は比較的類似していて、寄付については年齢が有事の形であるということだとすると、若者も関心を示しているということになり、文化の消費と寄付については、文化政策としてこれらのデータをどのように捉えたらよいでしょうか。例えば、レディー4、これ寄付を集めるプラットフォームですけれども、そこの調べによると、コロナ禍を経て、寄付について文化全体の支援額は2020年の 1.5 倍になった。博物館、美術館に限れば7倍にもなったという発表があったんですけれども、コロナのせいで入館料収入に頼れなくなった文化的な施設というのは、寄付に目を向けていったらいいっていうようなことが言えるのか、それは若者にも訴求していくことができるのでしょうかと、大体そんなような内容です。
非常に、重要な質問をされたと私は認識しておりまして、で、この一つの重要なポイントというのは、コロナ禍という状況というのが、人々のメンタリティにどういう影響を与えたかということなんですね。で、社会的に非常に苦しい状況に置かれた人々が、増えたということと、それを目の当たりにしたっていう、そういう状況において、人々の公社会的な感覚っていうか、感性というのが相当強く刺激されたんではないだろうかという。で、特にですね、未来のある若者にとって、このコロナの状況というのは、実は自分の将来にとってもですね、極めて重要な状況であって、それをなんとか改善しなければいけないっていうような、そういう考え方を強く持った若者がいたんではないだろう、増えたんではないだろうかということであります。で、今回の調査である程度分かってきたことは、公社会的な考え方が強い人っていうのは、文化 に対してもかなりポジティブな姿勢を持っているということがデータで分かったわけでありまして、その話とコロナ禍で社会的な感覚というものが強まったということと、やはり整合的に説明しうるということだと思います。
はい、ありがとうございました。サナさんにも3つほど質問を頂戴しているんですけれども、ちょっと後のセッションで、お答えする時間を見ながらということにいたしまして、先にデイビッド・スロスビーさんからコメントを頂戴したいと思います。David, would you like to start commenting on the presentation?
Thank you very much, Nabucco, and thank you to the organizers of this meeting for providing a very interesting two papers and discussion. I will start by saying something about the background to the concept of cultural value. This is mostly things that we know quite well, but nevertheless, the concept of cultural value is something which has been in the forefront of discussions within cultural studies and also in cultural economics, which is where I come from. There has been, of course, the debate about, which was mentioned earlier, about inherent intrinsic versus instrumental value, and that's quite a valid proposition that has been debated. And also within cultural economics, we look particularly at the distinctions between the economic value, which can be seen as a sort of commercial value of art and culture, or the sort of value which can be estimated and represented in monetary terms, versus those values which can't be appropriately measured in monetary terms. And those distinctions in terms of the definition, if you like, of cultural value have been fairly fundamental in the way the debate has evolved over the last few years, and provides, I think, the context within which this paper and this whole project has been placed, and the directions in which it's going, and the sorts of things which it is finding. It really seems to me to draw together all of those aspects of cultural value into a sense of culture and art in a much broader way as they affect individuals and communities. And I think that the question, or the basic proposition which is being addressed in this study and in these papers is, why do arts and culture matter? And if they do matter, what conclusions do we draw from that? In particular, how those conclusions might affect the determination of policy. And that's the way I think this interesting project has been going, and is continuing to go, and is providing us with some very interesting and stimulating results to throw some light onto those sorts of issues. I'll just make a few comments about the individual papers, and I found both of them really very interesting indeed, with a lot of data, and it's not possible, of course, in a very brief commentary to draw attention to everything in detail, but I can pick out a few points which which particularly interested me in the sorts of things which the two papers have said. Firstly, the distinction between the role of arts and culture in individual lives and in society, and at the local level. I'd actually put those last two in the reverse order, because I think that it seems to me that we start from the individual, and all of this is based on the opinions of individuals, because that's what a survey is about. It's questioning individuals and asking for their attitudes and their opinions. So we start at the individual level, and that is where we can be sure that we get some fairly accurate data that relate to people. And then it seems to me the next level is community. That is the sorts of interactions that we have with the people around us in the local area. If we define community in a geographic sense or locational sense, we could also define it in communities of sports people or other sorts of criteria by which we might judge communities. But then it seems to me that is a fairly particular way in which we interpret the way the individual fits within a milieu, a local society. And then beyond that, we have the whole society, which is the nation as a whole. So, I mean, I don't think it makes any difference to the way in which this survey has been done. It's just that I would see in logical taxonomic terms or classification terms, I would see them being those last two being in the other order. Anyway, let me take them just one by one. In the case of the individual interpretations, one of the things which I think is interesting in those results is the fact that people recognize that art and culture can give them experiences which take them out of themselves. We've done some work here in theatre that's much more specific, but it's about theatre audiences and the sorts of experiences that they get when they go to the theatre, which is a sort of microcosm, if you like, of cultural participation and cultural engagement more generally. And one thing which we have found has been the notion of a transcendental experience. We've used that word to mean something where people are taken out of themselves and transported to some other sort of level, if you like, and that art has a particular, and culture more generally, has a particular capacity to do this, and that people recognize this, and that's something which is important to them. And I thought that was an interesting point to come out of that. I also thought that the distinction there between the personal feelings and the economic, the more practical sort of economic consequences was also an interesting contrast. In the case of the society, of course, the importance of children, education, cultural transmission is very clearly there, and that's fine. That sort of reinforces what we know, and quite a lot of this does add weight to what or more specific data to support ideas that are there already. But I thought that it was interesting when people look at society as a whole and the role of culture, they do actually recognize, or they do seem to recognize in the English data, that the cultural industries, which have been, of course, in the UK, have been very prominent in policy terms and have probably much more so than in other countries. And so people may well be more aware of the fact that art, culture, cultural activity generates economic outcomes, and that was there, that there was a very clear response to the propositions about tourism, about creating jobs, about increased competitiveness, and so on. And I think that's an interesting observation, that people actually do recognize that, and that has implications then, I think, carrying through to the question of what the policy conclusions that you can draw from these data. I think that has some quite considerable relevance to that. The social interactions which are portrayed in the data on the local level is something which is also very important and can be mobilized, particularly in times where there's a lack of tolerance within societies, conflicts perhaps, which happen. We know this happens happens occasionally, and which often generated by cultural difference of some sort. And so the importance of social interaction and the recognition of the importance of social interaction is something which can really be mobilized in thinking about local level. And this would be at the local level, I guess, in terms of local authorities and so on. Moving on to the question of subsidy awareness, I would also make exactly the same point that Professor Kawashima made. That point had certainly occurred to me too. And I think there's, you say this might have affected, I'd go further than that. I say this it very clearly did affect the answer to that question. It's just a pity that it was phrased in those terms, because I think what you really want to know is, are people aware of the fact that governments subsidise culture now? And that's a very different question. And I think you would have got a very different answer. Having said that, as Professor Kawashima pointed out, you did nevertheless get answers about whether they thought the Arts Council was good and so on. I assume that was those responses came from the whole sample and not just from those who said, yes, we recognise cultural subsidies. If it came from the whole sample, then it does sort of reinforce the fact that that question about awareness probably doesn't mean much. And then the other thing I thought was interesting from all of that too was the fact that there's a lot of awareness about artists, and I do a lot of work with artists, of course, and a lot of my own work is to do with artists. And so one of the things which we always find is that, curiously enough, there is quite a strong support for artists in the community at large, and a recognition of the way in which they work, and the recognition that the incomes that they receive are not commensurate with the value that they create for society. I just to move on, I don't want to run out of time, to move on to the question of policy conclusions that you would draw. I think the fact that there were no clear priorities coming out of your question about cultural policy is a bit disappointing in a way, because it doesn't give much of a lead. It just says everything that cultural policy does is regarded as a good thing. The traditional one traditional way of representing this issue is the distinction between access, providing access to people to culture, and the promotion of excellence and high quality, high standards. And this is sometimes seen as a trade-off. And it would have been nice to see a little bit more that might articulate that sort of the relationship, if that is in fact the case. But that you wouldn't do that within the context of the sort of question that you asked, and you can't really draw any conclusions about that from the data. But nevertheless, it's still an interesting question to think about. But one thing which I think is interesting out of all of this is, and it relates also to the work that Professor Yagi talked about, and that's the question of social well-being and happiness. I thought that analysis is particularly relevant now to questions of cultural policy, as governments generally take on an interest in social well-being as an aim of government policy. And you probably know that well-being budgets are now starting to be prepared in some countries. There's one in Scotland, there's one in New Zealand. I think that we're even going to get something like that here in Australia. And it stems from the work which goes back some time now, on social well-being as an alternative measure to GDP when one thinks about the welfare of the community and the ways in which the actions of government can affect the society in which we live. So I think those results are really very interesting indeed. Just turning to Professor Yagi's very interesting presentation, and I think that for me that sort of moves forward from just simply gathering the data, tabulating it all, and drawing the conclusions from what you can see, to a deeper analysis of what are some of the relationships between the variables that you've collected. And the work that he has done uses essentially two methodologies. One is the factor analysis, or the principal components analysis, to find the clustering of responses, and the other is to look at the determinants, the causal connections, which actually take you a stage further than just simply the raw data. I mean, the raw data in these situations are always very interesting, and you can go a little further with some cross tabulations like you did, like Sana did for gender and other things. That's all very interesting, and it does show some causal relationships happening there. But to get further than that, you really do need to include all of the variables, and that's what the regressions that Professor Yagi have done. That's what it does. I think that the way the factors fell out is really quite intriguing. I'm not quite sure what to make of that, but it does make a sort of sense, and in some ways it's a little surprising. But I think that's really quite interesting, that it needs to be sort of fleshed out a little bit more as to what the implications are of making the distinction between fundamental rights, trust in society, contribution to society, and personal value. I think we can see it's intuitively obvious why those sort of fall out like that, but I think that there's more that can be done to interpret just what those different groupings mean. And also, one of the things one does with factor analysis, of course, is to have a look at the characteristics of the people who cluster into each of those groups, if they are indeed exclusive groups, which isn't always the case, but if they are, then the characteristics of the people who tend to have personal values, who tend to be more concerned about fundamental rights, may be interesting to see, and that's where you might pick up some of the gender differences or the age differences and so on, which you then do a little more directly in the multiple regressions. And the regressions, I thought all of them were interesting. I was particularly interested in the one about spending, of course, because I'm an economist, and I like to see the ways in which the different attributes which are contained in the survey contribute to expenditure on culture, and also as I just mentioned, the happiness and social well-being one. Just finally, then, in relation to cultural policy and the conclusions which you can draw, I know this is work in progress, and so you've got a way to go yet before you'll have some final conclusions from all of this to illuminate policy. But I think that, as I mentioned before, that the questions of culture providing support, or cultural policies of providing support for culture to improve the quality of the experiences that people get on the one hand, and to widen the audience base or the consumption base. And these two things are often sort of amalgamated into the joint objectives of access and excellence. And if that's the case, that's a sort of is sometimes seen as a trade-off. You can either have arts which is really popular and letting everybody in, or you can have highbrow stuff which isn't so accessible. That's another question, I think. And there's quite a lot of information in the survey which will help to say a bit more about that question. So I think that's all I'll say. I think that both of the papers were really interesting, and I look forward to them being published very soon, so that we can read them in detail. Thank you very much.
はい、大変貴重なコメントありがとうございました。また今後の研究への 示唆もたくさんいただいて、おっしゃるように、これまだちょっと途中の、ワークインプログレスではありますけれども、たくさんの、励ましの言葉と今後の方向性について、示唆をいただきましてありがとうございました。Hegel, would you like to pick up some questions that have come in English so far? Can you see the questions?
I'll have a look. Well, should I respond?
No, actually, I asked Hegel if she wants to moderate the question time, because there are some questions already.
Okay,
yeah,
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Ha Kyung-lee. I'm leading the. We've got some questions. The first one is about something basic about our survey. So the question is about the sample composition. So Sana, would you respond quickly?
Yes. So our study is based on the data collected through a 20-minute online survey, and the sample size was 2,123 English adults. And this was demographically, the sample size was demographically representative by age, gender, region, social grade, and ethnicity and income. And I will actually share my screen and show you some of the graphs showing our sample size distribution. So in terms of gender, we had 52 female, 48 male respondents. This is how our sample was distributed in terms of region, and this is age by region, and also social grade. And I think the question was about ethnicity. So the majority of our sample was white, 88% white, then 4% mixed, 5% Asian, 2% Black, and 2% other. So in terms of education level as well. And that's all I have in terms of the sample. I'll stop sharing.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Nobuko, we have a question written in Japanese on the screen at the chat box.
Okay.
The third one, would you introduce it?
Okay, no problem. サナさんへのこれは質問になると思いますし、ある部分日本にも関係することの質問なんですけれど、八木先生も見えますか？
はい。
はい。文化活動への参加と労働組合の参加が性の関係が相関関係があるとサナさんがおっしゃっていたように思うんですけれども、イギリスの今労働組合の活動や組織率っていうのは高いんでしょうか、どうなのでしょうかということでして、ちょっとそれ自体をお答えするの難しいかもしれないんですけれども、その労働組合とかいろいろなコミュニティのグループだとか、他に社会的な活動に参加しているチャリティーとかに参加している人っていうのは英国では非常に高い比率でしたよね。そのことについて少し触れたらいいのかなと思います。で、次、同じ方からの日本についての話なんですけれども、日本はもうそういった労働組合の組織率が低くて、ましてや下がっており、そのような労働組合への参加状況と文化活動への参加という調査をしても、あまり意味ある結果が出ないような気がするのですが、どうでしょうかということで、これは八木先生から後ほど 労働組合自体より、いろいろ社会的な活動っていうことで聞きましたよね。要するに職場と家庭以外の。Okay, Sana, could you respond? Is it possible for you?
Me?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I'm afraid I don't really know exact statistics and situation about labor union participation. But I assume it is higher than in Japan. What is interesting was that, this was discussed in our previous seminar, that there is a clear correlation between all kinds of social organizations, including participating in charities. So those people who are interested in the arts are more likely to be involved in all kinds of social organizations and activities. Maybe Professor Yagi can expand on that from Japanese context.
はい、ちょっと、画面共有をさせていただきますと、出てますかね。はい。今回のデータで、労働組合に参加している比率というのはわずか 3.8% しか回答がないんですね。こういう点から考えると、労働組合と今回の結果を直接結びつけるというのはちょっと難しいという気がいたしまして、もう少し別の側面から、今回の結果をですね、見ていく必要があるんではないかなと。で、この後の質問とも少し、関係してくるかもしれないんですけども、これ、スロスビー先生からかなり刺激的なコメントをいくつか、受けまして、一つ、考えられる点としては、公的な支援をその芸術文化活動に対して行う。例えば劇場支援とかですね、音楽堂の支援なんかもあるわけですし、で、これまでですね、この文化芸術活動に対してなぜ支援をするのかということに対する一つの根拠というのは、この人々の生活というものを豊かにするっていうことと、それからある種の、国民的なアイデンティティを形成するとか、それから国としての文化的なアイデンティティみたいなものを保持するとか、こういうことのために公的な資金というものを投下するという議論だったんですけども、今回実はもう少し違う側面があるんではないか。要するに、結果を見るとプロソーシャルな人々がこの文化という文化芸術を通じてこの、人々との間のユニティ、絆とかですね、それからシンパシー、共感というものを強めるというような側面があって、この共感という部分を強めるということが実はいろいろな社会的なアクティビティに対して外部性ですね、エクスターナリティみたいなものを実は持っているんではないだろうかということなんですね。で、このエクスターナリティというものの存在があればですね、実は公的な資金を投下する重要な一つの根拠になりうるということがあって、で、その話が Q&A の中に入っているタックスペイヤーと、ノンタックスペイヤーとの間におけるその文化行政に対する感覚の違いというものがどう変わってくるのかみたいな議論とも実は結びついているわけですよね。で、実はほとんど多くの人というのは文化活動ということに関してはかなり社会性みたいなものを本能的に感じていたり、それから本能的にある意味で外部性みたいなものを感じているがゆえにですね、自分が払った税金の見返り的な形での、リンケージというのを実はあんまり感じてないんじゃないかと。で、しかもタックスシステムというのは基本的にどの国でも払う能力がある人が払うという。で、その払っていることとベネフィットということは基本的に多くの人は結びつけて考えていないはずなんですよね。で、むしろなぜ公的資金が投下されるのかということに対してやはり社会的な価値みたいなものを強く認識していると。だから、そういう広いフレームワークの中で考えていった時のワンエグザンプルとして労働組合の話というのは関わってくる可能性はあるわけですよ。要するに労働組合に参加する人のプロファイルとかですね、そういうものが実はプロソーシャルな人々と重なっている部分が多いという話であれば、そこはリンクが発生するという、大体そういうことで。
少し分かってきました。
Okay, thank you so much. And Taeyong Kim asked a question about taxpayers, non-taxpayers, and Yagi-san provided some answers to this question. When it comes to our survey design, actually, we didn't distinguish these two groups of people, so that's another answer to the question. And we have a new question coming from Sayaka. Actually, Sayaka Sakoda-san asked two questions. I don't know whether they are the same question or not. Nobuko, would you introduce Sayaka Sakoda-san's question?
男性の労働参加率とは異なって、女性の労働参加率は文化娯楽活動に性の影響を与えることが分かっています。労働組合があるような大企業に属する女性の文化娯楽への消費支出は高いと思いますし、女性の正規労働率が高まればその消費額も大きくなるかと思いますという、これは質問というよりも、一つの、コメントだと思います。そうですよね。はい。下にもう一つあるのは同じことが書いてあると思います。
Okay, so that's there was a comment rather than a question in observation. Thank you so much. And I observed that there is a big difference between the UK and Japan when it comes to people's participation, social participation. The rate tends to be higher in the UK, but somehow in Japan, the Japanese team figured out how much people are socially responsible, how much they have social pro-social attitude, and how that affects their cultural engagement and consumption donations. It's so interesting. So
can I just quickly add,
yes.
because I pulled out the Excel spreadsheet with all the data, and I could find some of the statistics regarding the participation in labor unions and other social organizations. And I can quickly share that if that's okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And also we have a recording. So Sana mentioned that there is a recording available. Yeah.
Yes, so we asked our participants how much they are involved in the following organizations and activities, and we can see that from the total sample, it's actually not that big. It's 24% are involved with labor unions, 26 with political parties, environmental organizations are slightly more popular. Residents organizations and associations, local community organizations. So yeah, online communities seem to be the most popular form of social organizations to be involved in. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. So I think that we can take a couple of further questions. So the audience members, if you have any comments or questions, please use the Q&A section.
Yeah, actually, there is one to Professor Yagi in English.
Yeah.
According to your graph, cultural spending is depending on financial asset quite a lot. However, your summary and conclusion does not seem to reflect this financial aspect at all and reduces the survey into people's attitude only. Would you add some more explanation on this, please?
はい。この金融資産、それから所得ということがですね、どういう形で文化的な活動に影響を与えているかということに関して、まず、この結果自体はそれほどサプライズングではなかったという、ある意味で、多くの人々が予想する、すなわち豊かであればそれだけ文化的な活動に支出ができるっていう、そういう部分というのはあるわけですよね。ただ、それほど自明ではない、トリビアルではない問題というのも実はこの点に関していくつかあるわけです。例えば金融資産とそれから所得とどちらが文化的活動とかドネーションに対して強い影響を持ってるんでしょうかというようなクエスチョンとかですね、それから家計所得と個人所得と影響は違うんでしょうかというクエスチョンとかですね、ここは結構メカニズムは簡単ではないというふうに思っています。迫田さんがですね、ちょっとコメントしていただいた女性で働いている女性、特にキャリアの高所得女性というのは文化的活動に対してかなり支出が多いっていう話というのは裏返して言うと、それでは豊かな家計にいる世帯にいる働いていない女性の文化活動はどう違うんですかということを今度考える必要が出てくるわけですよね。で、それはまさにフローの所得、自分で稼いだ所得がどういう影響を与えるのかということと、ファイナンシャルアセットがどういう影響を与えるのかということの違いとも実は関係していると。で、ここについてはそれほどまだしっかり分析はしていないんですけども、この分析を行うことのインプリケーションというのが一体どこにあるのかっていう話なんですね。で、すなわち、ある意味で、社会の中で、いろいろ自分で所得を働きながら所得を得ているということが、実はプロソーシャリティみたいなものを実は高めているという可能性もある。それに対して、豊かな家庭の、働いていない女性、お金があるんだけども、そういう意味ではプロソーシャルな感覚というのはそれほど醸成されていない可能性がある。で、その2人の女性がですね、同じ女性でありながら、 文化支出のパターンが違っているとすると、ここはちょっとトリビアルではない話になっていくんではないかなという気がいたします。
はい、ありがとうございました。
Okay.
少し
Thank you. And I think that we need to conclude the session. As part of it, I'd like to share with you two reflections. And the cultural value discussion and debate is a huge topic. So there are many questions to ask and to answer still. And reflection one for me is, what about non-attendees and those who are not interested in culture and the arts? What about their cultural life? We didn't ask specific questions about that, either in the UK or in Japan. What about their understanding of cultural value? And we can also ask what type of culture and entertainment they value, and beyond those cultural activities specified by us. So that's a large question for us. And another reflection is about the rules of education. The Japanese findings are very interesting, and they show that personal attitude and personal values are more important. They are more important parameters of people's cultural engagement and cultural spending. So Yagi-san talked about the importance of person having the sense of social contribution and social responsibilities. But I was thinking that maybe education is important in shaping personal values and personal attributes. So that can be still there is a very important sort of connection between education and cultural engagement on the other side. And so in the last year, we looked at the issues around cultural value and cultural policy purposes. And in this year, our focus is on cultural work and labor, especially policy agendas and ideas, proposals that have emerged, and to address the precarity in cultural labor. And we are asking what are these ideas and how they can be put into practice. And one of the key agendas and proposals we identified is very closely related to today's discussion. That is the idea that the broader recognition of values made by cultural workers and artists should be the basis for the development of any policies to be made to support cultural workers and tackle their precarity. So I believe that our discussion around cultural value will continue into the end of this year. And we are going to organize more public events like this. So please keep an eye on our future events. And I hope to see you next time. And my thanks to Nobuko and the Japanese team for hosting today's seminar. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much indeed for all the presentators and the commentator, David. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.